Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where we're joining from today. I think I'd like to start by saying thank you for making our time to join this interesting conversation. I guess some might be thinking, why are we talking election now when the next election is happening in 2027 for Nigeria, for instance? But as you would know, 2024, 2025 through 2027 are important years for election across Africa. And Dataphyte not just being a Nigeria-centric organization, but one that, deploys all its resources for socioeconomic development, good governance, and democracy from Nigeria to the rest of Africa, decided to start to talk about the fundamental issues that are important for election or electioneering across the country. In 2024, Africa, scheduled to have, or countries in Africa were scheduled to have about 19 elections. I think about 13 of those held. In 2025 also, we have about 10 scheduled, one already held a couple of weeks back in Gabon. And the pointers are already, showing themselves. And we thought it was important, first, as it is our tradition since we launched in 2020, to start to have the conversation, to begin the discourse that will define or that will determine the integrity, the justice, fairness, and all the necessary things about inclusion on election right ahead, or not waiting until the month, the quarter, or the year of election, especially for our country, Nigeria. In 2023, in preparation for 2023, Dataphyte 18 months ahead started to write, do a couple of dialogue series to discuss the key issues that we believe will drive, will determine the nature and level of inclusion that will drive the Nigeria election. But we think beyond just that, what is West Africa? What is Africa's conversation? What should it be now in an age where data and AI is driving almost every other conversation? One of our panelists, last year, his organization, Mr. Samson Itodo, already started this conversation, started to look at considerations by electoral management bodies across Africa, what the pointers were already saying in terms of policy readiness, in terms of adoption challenges. And these are many more things we want to start to talk about today. And this meeting is not just another conversation, it's the launch of Dataphyte Election Dialogue Series for towards 2027 Nigeria election, but also to begin to speak to other important conversations across West African countries that will be holding their elections in the year. Cote d'Ivoire is coming on. Cameroon will also be happening. There are other countries that would also, Guinea-Bissau will also be having its own election, all things being equal. So what are the key things that we need to pay attention to as citizens, as also not just citizens who are going to be casting our vote, but as people who may also be coming on the ballot paper as candidates? And what are those dynamics? What are those important things about identity? What are those important things about the weapon of statehood that is used to either foil or frame election and the success of it? Those are the things that we want to begin to have the conversation on. We use the opportunity to say thank you to our panelists. Some had to come on impromptu. We say thank you for making out the time. I look forward to learning a lot from you and picking those key points beyond just how elections should be done, but what are the key things that we need to pay attention to as technology starts to drive or determine some of the things that we want in a democratically elected or people elected government representatives or leaders in our continent and across the region. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much, Joshua. I think it's time for us to meet our panelists. We have three great minds on the panel this morning. And first is Miss Ayisha Osori. She's a lawyer, writer, and development expert with over 20 years of experience across the private, development, and nonprofit sectors. She currently serves as a director at the Open Society Foundation's Ideas Workshop, focusing on grant making around democracy, identity, and open society. Previously, she was executive director at OSIWA, where she led strategic reforms and regional grants making. Aisha is also the author of Love Does Not Win Elections. We'll be talking about that later on, about that book. And she holds degrees from the University of Lagos, Harvard Law School, and the Harvard Kennedy School. You're welcome, Aisha. The second panelist is a gentleman, Mr. Samson Itodo. He is the executive director of Yiaga Africa. He hardly needs an introduction, and is an experienced community organizer and development practitioner with over a decade of experience in constitution building, governance reform, electoral governance, civic engagement, and political organizing. He's currently a member of the African Union Working Group on AI in Peace, Security, and Governance. He is a principal partner at the Election Law Center and the founding convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement. With a background in law and postgraduate degrees in law and public policy, Samson continues to lead efforts towards advancing electoral integrity on the continent, Africa. And our third panelist is Ms. Khadijah El-Usman. She is a digital rights advocate, legal practitioner, researcher, and policy expert, leading the Paradigm Initiatives in Anglophone West Africa programs. As senior programs officer, she drives policy advocacy, strategic litigation, and capacity building to advance internet freedom, digital rights, and data protection across the region. With expertise in data governance, artificial intelligence, elections, and women's rights online, Khadija has successfully led coalition responses to legislation, policy dialogues, and digital security training for civil society, journalists, and the judiciary. She's also a first responder on PIN's reporting platform supporting victims of digital rights violations. Welcome, Khadija. Welcome, Samson. Welcome, Aisha, to on the panel. Now, for us to just illustrate simply, as I like to do with uh, offerings, whether research or reporting, just want to simplify these people. So probably we can, if we want to cast them in the election ecosystem, I would look at Samson as someone who we can imagine an election umpire, maybe an INEC chairman. So he is a process. He is so vast in the election process. So if we wanted to give them jobs, like we all know, probably we would say Samson should be our INEC chairman. So we expect him to have sufficient knowledge about the election process from the beginning, from before the election to the election and the post-election. So, and Aisha will be the Amazon on participation. That is, if you want to elect someone, if you want to know about the political process, the issue of participation, uh, probably, I mean, those issues that drive the choice of people. I mean, inclusion, women inclusion, inclusion of professionals. I mean, in that election process itself, in that electioneering itself, I think Ayisha will be maybe a candidate, and she has been a candidate before. So I will be posing some questions that relates to the election proper, the political activity itself. I'm not sure Samson wants to run, but we know that she has run before, so we'll be looking at her both as an activist and also as a politician. And Khadijah, I will be looking at her as the one who would want to handle our IREV, our bimodal registration, and all of that. So I'll be posing questions that relate to that digital governance and data-based management. So probably we could just do a simple profile. That might suffice as a simple profile of a panelist. Now, I'm Oluseyi Olufemi. I started developing interest in politics and election, I think, during the last election cycle, which we began just like this 2 years before the election. We started 2021, and just some weeks to the election, we were able to use data to really moderate the election outcome proper, and the same way we were able to use it to set an agenda for the all the candidates to say this is what is expected of them. So I developed interest in this line, I think lately, probably about 3-4 years ago. Now, I would just want to start with, I mean, all of our panelists, Joshua has spoken about Africa having about 13 out of the 17 elections that were held in last year, 2024, took place in Africa. And we have 6 new leaders that have emerged, with Gabon election that brought up another dictator and an army official as the newly elected president. So I just want a general overview. I will begin from Ayisha. What is your perspective? How do you rate? How do you rank electoral integrity, the electoral process generally in Africa, and perhaps as it relates also to the events all over the world? Ayisha.
Thank you, Shay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We don't mind if you are able to have, come up, on video, We don't mind.
I am on video. Well, I just want to say thank you to Dataphyte for organizing this really interesting topic, and to also apologize for joining a bit late. It's running from meeting to meeting, but it's a pleasure to be here to talk about elections with Khadijah and Samson, and with you moderating. I have to say, I mean, mulling over this conversation over the last couple of days, getting ready for this, I had to think, if we're talking about elections, I mean, why exactly are we talking about elections? I think we heard about how so many countries are going into elections, but I want to start with a few provocations if we're talking about elections, because the context within which we're talking about elections is actually democracy. And I think this will sort of answer your question in a way, which, if we're looking at West Africa, doesn't seem to be doing that great, aside from the 3 countries that have had coups, with Mali, multiple coups. So we have Burkina, Niger, some form, and Mali, and them pulling out of ECOWAS. And then you can even just talk about the quality of the elections that we're having. And so there's a sense that we focus so much on elections as opposed to looking at democracy. So we've sort of fallen into this trap of, in a way, assessing the health of our democracy by how periodically we have elections. But elections are becoming more and more meaningless, if we're going to be honest. And I had a smile to myself when you talked about me speaking to inclusion of women. To be honest, it's the inclusion of all Nigerians right now, or all West Africans at this point. And if we use Nigeria as a touch point, saying that we're all Nigerians and we're speaking largely from Nigeria, the voter turnout, we shouldn't be talking about inclusion of just women or even young people. We should be talking about inclusion for everyone. There's definitely a trend that shows, a pattern that shows that people are no longer confident with elections. So we've seen a periodic decline since 1999 in voter turnout. And so during the 2023 elections, we had less than 30% come out for the election. That's actually really bad. So is what we practice really democracy? Is it working for all of us right now? Why is our focus on elections, which for me right now might be the weakest criteria of being a democracy? Because if we're just turning over either the same people, if we use Togo for it as an example, or Rwanda, speaking largely about Africa, what does it matter if you have elections if it's the same people who keep coming back? That's one. Or even when you change them, nothing really changes fundamentally in terms of how we are governed. And we can use Nigeria as an example. Are we focused on elections because of the risk of AI to elections, or is it because of the opportunity of AI? Because there's both. Will elections alone, fair or not, keep our democracies healthy? And if there are opportunities with AI, if there are opportunities with elections and AI, do these same opportunities or similar opportunities exist with strengthening the independence of institutions such as the judiciary and the legislature? Again, I want by the end of this conversation for us to sort of, I hope, sort of question why the focus on elections all the time. Is this again is this donor driven? Is this because this is what the donors care about? Is this because this is what philanthropies will fund? Or is this really actually what really matters in terms of a healthy democracy? So I would say that for me, honestly, I'm becoming quite skeptical, not just of elections being the vehicle for assessing the health of a democracy, but even actually what we think we're practicing as a democracy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think there is a freeze there. Ayisha, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Okay. I think we lost her there. All right. All right. Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry. You lost me.
Yeah, so you can just conclude your thoughts. Let's have your.
So I was just saying that I know why we focus on elections, because elections sort of give us hope that we can shift something. So we used Gambia in 2016 as an example. That was one example of a sit-tight dictator where before we knew it, through elections, we managed to overthrow him. But if you ask the average Gambian today, if their lives have fundamentally changed since Yahya Jammeh left, what would the answers be? So for me, I want us to interrogate why the focus on elections constantly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayisha. That's thought-provoking, and is a very great place to start. We will have to address that as the discussion progresses. Can we have Khadijah come up? Then we have, what are your thoughts? Elections. Ayisha said, why the focus on elections? It should be about democracy and governance. Governance, the dividends of democracy, and but of course she admits in some way elections could be a means to achieving that. It appears to be the only means for now. Now, what are your thoughts on elections generally? We are looking at you as the woman who is either in charge of our beavers, in charge of our IREV, and in charge of seeing to it that results are transmitted efficiently. So what are your thoughts on the way technology has been used in elections in Nigeria recently? I mean, in Africa, and probably perhaps in comparison with here.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Khadijah.
Okay, great. So I mean,
Yes.
I wanted to start by thanking you for having me on and thinking this conversation was important enough to have. I found that Aisha already had me thinking on, why elections really, and basically just, when you scatter the status quo and have people thinking, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are here in the first place. So with technology, everyone seems to look at technology as the next best thing, and in many ways it's true. It's something that we're unable to hide from anymore. We are running towards technological solutions in everything. We are looking at technology solutions for communication, for healthcare, for agriculture. So obviously, we would start with technology solutions for elections. And we've seen it come in different ways. We've seen over the past few years, there are a lot of biometric voter registration. We saw it in Nigeria, in Ghana, and Sierra Leone. All these countries who hosted elections in the past 2-3 years used biometric systems to register voters. We had, of course, for us, smart card readers, voter authentication devices. We're now having more and more people transmitting results electronically. The usual concept is people vote, ballot boxes are put in a bus or a train or an armored vehicle, and it is, shipped to where INEC is, and then there's the manual counting, and all of that. But for a lot of us, especially in civil society, we're seeing that technology has made it easier to monitor elections, to monitor what is happening. People are reporting back to situation rooms, using apps, dashboards, and the like. But also for the youth, then we're seeing technology playing a role in terms of campaigns, awareness, and all of that. So we've seen it somewhat make the process easier, but it has also in many ways made the process difficult. I also need to add here that because of Nigeria's highest population are the youth. A lot of people who voted the last time were first-time voters. They're just coming of age. All the information that they know about electoral processes are from, the internet, without ever having to interface with these people who they're voting for. All the information that they get is off the internet, and a lot of it is not reliable. So where we affect, or where anything affects the internet in any way, whether it is misinformation or the internet being shut down or data not having integrity, it significantly affects the outcome of the election because of the population that we have. The population is mostly online, getting their information online, and quite frankly, if you let it, people will vote online. So that means that technology is playing such a hugely significant role in our elections, but what we're not doing is having enough integrity. We're not having enough, or we're not seeing enough integrity in terms of the way the data is being transmitted, the way that it is being collected. A lot of it does not feel credible to the average voter. Now, and I'll use INEC as an example, would give you numbers that say this is the winner, because there are various other things that are not making sense to the voters, the way that it was collected, the numbers that they saw, where they were, what is being versus what is being announced, the numbers of voters that were actually registered. All of it just doesn't look great. It's like there are also issues with the candidates that were being registered, how they were registered, whether they were qualified to be registered in the first place. All of it affects the integrity of the election and how it looks. The weak data management, the weak transparency, the technical failures, you know, IREV falling apart here and there, something somewhere shutting down, the brazen political interference affects the integrity of the elections. My big point here is, okay, I see you're trying to stop me.
Okay, yeah, so I want to get back to you. I get it, you saying, yeah, technology from your own viewpoint, technology brings in efficiency, but in your view, it has not translated to integrity. And the way the technology was used, at least that you know in your estimation, there wasn't sufficient transparency, and there were technical issues and all of that. But I'm going to come back to you on what you think can be done, because that's the area of expertise. If we put you to manage those things, maybe in the next elections, or we second you to any of the country in West Africa or Africa, how are you going to do things differently? Yeah, thank you. So the buck stops at our INEC chairman's, on his table, and I was intentional when I listened. I had us listen to Ayisha and Khadijah first, because when everything goes wrong, it's the INEC chairman that gets the blame and all of that. When politicians and everyone does what they can do, the only one person that everybody mentions is the INEC. So I want us to hear Samson. You are the process person. You are the guru in why Beavers did not work well, why IRF did not work well. You've written about AI, its possibilities in terms of information, disinformation. Why do we have all these problems that Ayisha has brought about, that Khadijah has also, highlighted? What is your view? Have you done well? Have we had, credible elections? Or looking at the trend, is it getting better or getting worse? We may not be where we ought to be, but perhaps in your own view, we've done well enough in Africa, in Nigeria, in Africa, and perhaps comparing with peers also around the world. Samson.
Thank you very much. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, please. Yeah, we can. Yeah.
All right. So thanks, Dataphyte, Joshua, and yourself for the invitation to contribute to this discussion. Also delighted to be sharing the panel with Madam Ayisha and Khadijah. And I think they've provided the necessary provocation that can shape this discussion. So your question is laden with too many questions, and I don't know where to start from. But let me begin with, if you look at the continental outlook, and perhaps end with where we are in Nigeria. Is it possible to share my slides? Can I?
Yeah,
is it
go
possible?
ahead. Go ahead.
Let me see if I can share this. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So since we're reviewing 2024, as we say, is a super year of elections across the globe. Yes, there were a couple of elections. One country, and I'll focus on West Africa. One country here is Ghana, because at the time that I prepared this, Ghana's election was yet to hold, because they held in December, not updated this. So when you look across West Africa, where we had elections between 2023 and 2024. In Nigeria, you had some governorship elections and local government elections, and I'll probably speak to that very briefly. But if you look at a country like Togo, and I think it's been referenced in previous remarks, whether those are actually elections. And the key question is, are we having credible elections or electoral coronation? And I dare say that in most instances, it is mainly electoral coronation and not sort of credible elections that reflect the will of the people. You've referenced a country like Gabon. What you see in Gabon is just a travesty. You had a military coup instigated by the supposed winner of the elections with claims to have over 90% of the votes. at least I see on social media, they say he's better than one other president who went for elections also last year and got 99% of the votes. But one of the elections within the region that we celebrate so much is the Senegal elections, because of the level of the quality of that election, even though there were political tensions that preceded that election. But you clearly see that there was not necessarily a semblance, but the election did meet the integrity test, not because the outcome was a reflection of the will of the people, but the management of the election compared to other elections in the region was really acceptable. Now, if you look at this slide, when we think about electoral integrity, because your first question was about electoral integrity. Now, this is a sort of comprehensive analysis from the Electoral Integrity Project on the state of electoral integrity across the world, but I just focused on Africa. So when you look within Africa, when you see countries in red, those are danger zones. The level of integrity is very, very poor. So Gabon, it's one of them. And this is data from 2012 to 2024. But I just wanted to zero in on, West Africa. So you look at Guinea, you look at countries like Burkina Faso, where elections were postponed. Look at where Mali stands at 39. This is a state of integrity in these countries. The countries in perhaps last year who we can say fairly, have some high levels of integrity is Ghana, which scored 70, and then the Liberian elections as well. So this is the sort of outlook in terms of the integrity of elections, within the region. Yeah. 3 quick points as I conclude. One, we're expending a lot of state resources on elections, but the quality of these elections are declining. And all that is just driven by a sort of a pervasive political culture within our climate, where politicians want to secure power at all costs, not to advance the common good, but to either settle inter-elite wars or primitively accumulate wealth. So that's the first sort of reason. The second is, whether you call it democratic backsliding, even though it's a contested concept, or democratic erosion or democratic recession, we are seeing weak institutions that are unable to hold authoritarians to account. So when you say electoral commissions are also grappling, with independence because of the assault on their independence by the state, because of the determination of political actors to seize power at all costs. And lastly, that whilst we're spending more on elections, the quality of elections are declining, the turnout for elections are also declining in some cases, although in some countries it's quite high. Even though Ghana recorded somewhere around 68%, which is about 2 or 3% from the last election, even though it was a decline, but compared to countries like Nigeria, which has the lowest turnout in Africa, you cannot, reconcile why we're spending so much, and we're deploying a lot of technology, and I'm sure we'll come to that. But my last point is the fact that we're beginning to see a resurgence of old tactics of election manipulation. Technology is playing catch up, but I think as whether civil society organizations or citizens, we need to adapt, we need to reinvent. And I dare say that AI does provide a unique opportunity despite the risk that it poses, whether for enhancing electoral efficiency or efficiency in election management, but also enhancing trust. Maybe I'll hold for now. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah, probably I should just give you a follow-up. I'm coming to Ayisha, but just wait a minute. You landed on a point. I just want to quickly want us to take up from there. There's decline, electoral backsliding. I mean, democratic backsliding, decline in the electoral. The performance of the electoral system. Of course, huge cost of elections and all of that. But it appears that there is no other way for us to have, credible for us to continue to maintain the democratic process, it appears as we speak now, than these same elections. So I want to just touch on this, that how can good forensics, I mean, data management, database management, how can AI, I read your paper, how can these things help in all those stages, I mean, of elections, pre-election, during the election itself, and post-election? How can we use, the audience want to know, like we have 5-year-old children, how can we use, digital tools? How can we use technology, including AI, to bring about the credible elections like Ayisha would want? And then that's when we can now start talking about, the outputs, the outcome of the elections, governance in itself, dividends of democracy. So how can we use these digital tools, data, to ensure that when we even say 23%, voter turnout in Nigeria, how are we sure that it's actually 23%? How are we sure it is this and not that? So what's your own take? Because you are the process person. Yeah.
Well, I'm a student of the process. I wouldn't say I'm a process person, and I'm a student of elections, so not an expert, still learning the rules. But let me preface my response by just mentioning, and perhaps building on what Aisha said earlier about why this focus on elections. I think it's both a conceptual and a socialization problem. I think we've been socialized over time to think that once you get elections right, it means democracy is thriving. We've been socialized to think that once we vote at elections, there is no need to engage those who emerge from elections and ask them critical questions. We have to wait until another 4 years. That's the socialization, that we got. But now we've seen that the fact that democracy is under scrutiny, not because, and my argument has been, I don't think the challenge is with democracy. The challenge is with the species or the type of democracy that we practice, but more importantly, the actors who weaponize democratic instruments to oppress the people. A classic point, because this is Nigeria focused, is what's happening in Rivers State. Let me not go to Rivers. What's happening to Natasha? The whole concept of recall in a democracy is an accountability tool provided to citizens to hold their leaders to account when they lose confidence in their leaders. But what you have seen with Natasha's case is this same democratic instrument of accountability is being used by political actors, political mischief makers, to try to remove a senator that is performing just because he chose to challenge political authority. And these are the kinds of things that we see. So I think that, as a people, we need to go beyond this discourse about focusing so much on elections, that there is more. Democracy is more than elections. And I know in the last 10 years, that sort of socialization and advocacy has been up there. But to your question about AI and technology, I'd like to say 3 things, because just to use this opportunity. So not all technology is AI, because often people, say and conceive all electoral technologies as AI. No, it's not.
Yeah.
AI is not a new phenomenon. It's been here since the 1950s, so it's not new. Perhaps because of the exponential growth and use of large language models and generative AI, people are beginning, to think that it's actually new. So it's not new. That's the first one. The second point I'd like to make is that AI in elections is not just about disinformation. Because every time since 2024 till date, when people think about AI and they talk about AI, it begins and ends with disinformation. But there are other use cases of AI in Africa and in other parts of the world. And we can talk about that because AI can be used, and it's being used either for voter register cleanup or maintenance, or even for result management, or even data management using several AI techniques, whether it's outlier detection, deep learning, machine learning, all that, or even computer vision. Because part of the things that Dataphyte did using the SNAP project, I don't know if it's a SNAP project, a bit of that is also machine using computer vision to read, results sheets. So that's that. The last point I'd like to make, though, that yes, when you look across the continent, and to your question about what we can do, I think that we've got a voter register that is over-bloated as a country. We've got 93 million registered voters. At Yiaga Africa, we've audited the voters register. We even developed a statistical model for determining whether the voter register is underpopulated or overpopulated. I think that we need to clean up our voters register, and AI can actually help us do that. But if you use outlier detection and you compare or analyze or integrate whatever word you use, data either from the National Planning Commission, but for death and birth register. But let's say that is not even updated. But we have NIMSI, our National Identity Management Database. Yes, there are over 100 million people. A lot of them are not within the voting population, but there are also a lot of them who are within the voting population. If you harmonize this data and try to analyze them, there's a lot that AI can help us do. It can help us detect multiple registrants. It can also help us detect errors within the voters list. It can help us address the two fundamental problems of elections in Africa: the question of efficiency and trust. For efficiency is the challenge of logistics. One of the biggest issues that we see across elections on the continent is who has the power to determine who gets on the register and who votes at elections. That power resides in the Electoral Commission. And that decision is made based on data sets that the Electoral Commission has. And if that data set is not protected, is not clean, is not updated, it can be used to disproportionately disenfranchise a certain segment of society. This is why this discussion about data, about AI is critical.
Oh, thank you so much. That says it all. One of the in-house discussions we had before now with my colleagues is just what you said. Not all technologies is AI, and not, and so there has to be sometimes there's a thin line between all kinds of technology and AI, and sometimes there's a thick line. And I'm very happy that you were able to comment on that. And then comes the issue of data and the way things are. Personally, I think you've validated some of our own, and actually my own personal views that there's something not right with that voter register. So even all the so-called voter apathy, voter turnout, we are not very certain. And in our model and metrics department, we have been considering beginning to measure per capita based, not just based on the population figures that have been thrown here and there, but we should begin to look at the NIMSI, look at different kinds of data that are not politically, that could not be politically motivated to estimate populations, youth population, adult population, and things like voter population. Yeah. So I'm going to thank you. So I'll come back to you. I'm going now to Ayisha. Like I said, I cast in a way the three of you into roles. Yeah. So we come back to the issue of participation, and that already shows in your first in your opening statement that, hey, it's not just about elections, it's about deliverables. I don't care what you do, the technology you deployed, the data, whatever you did in elections, nothing has changed in terms of governance. People like Ayisha, there are people, women, men, young people, I mean, older people who think they have something to offer, who think they can do things better if elected. And do you think that there is a way that measurements, proper measurements, really having a count, and then like Samson said, updating this data and protecting this data can ensure that people like you who believe that they can bring about those deliverables, people who think they have genuine intention, that have both the character needed to deliver that deliverable and the competence needed. What are those ways, including any measurable way, any way that is objective? What are those ways that you think elections can bring, people who are qualified and people who have the right intention, that elections in Nigeria, in Africa, and indeed across the world can bring in more people who are competent and who are conscientious leaders? Ayisha.
Thanks. Just to understand, the question is, how can we get elections to be a vehicle for getting more
better leaders?
Different
people
types
will
of
think
leaders.
about these deliverables
Sure.
that you're advocating for.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think that's a really difficult question. And first of all, well, I guess I should also say I really enjoyed the interventions of Khadijah and Samson, and just want to, I will link, Samson talked about the voter register, and that's been one of my pet peeves as well. And I keep asking, why must we have a voter register of this sort that's easy to manipulate, whether with AI or without AI or without technology? Because again, we know that who gets to register, who gets to get their voter registration card, their PVC, all those things can be gamed, whether or not we use technology to actually manage that process. And so I would be wondering, and have been wondering for a long time, because there's actually a study that shows how much across West Africa we spend on voter registration. And this ability to use voter registers to disenfranchise millions of people is not something that's unique to Nigeria. Other people do it. Macky Sall did it in 2019 in the prelude to the election. So it's a favored tool now to disenfranchise the areas that you're not going to get support from. So my question is, why can't AI or tech be used to give us identity cards such as the type that we see abroad? So I had the pleasure of, or opportunity or privilege of going to school in America until today. That was like, 20 years ago. I still have my social security number. It is my number. Every time I have a chance to use or identify myself within the United States, I have that number. Same thing, I now live in England. For the last 3 years, I have a national identification number. It is my number. I'm not asked to bring any other thing when I need to register. Why can we not have, through technology, a way of registering births and deaths in a way that feeds into a central database? We keep talking about tech, we keep talking about AI. How about using it in these innovative ways? I don't know if anybody has tried to get a NIN. It is an amazingly painful thing to do, designed to extort people's time, energy, and even money. So you keep talking about how technology is going, I've been hearing for 20 odd years how technology is going to leapfrog Africa. How has it not leapfrogged us into identifying ourselves in a coherent way that doesn't rely on this charade of voter registration every couple of years? So for me, that goes back to how can we get credible people through elections? The truth is, by the time we're all voting on election day, my personal view is that we've already lost if we're going to scale it, let's say 80-90% of the battle to get anybody credible, because we're voting on election day for people who have come through compromised primaries, through compromised political parties, So before we talk about getting credible people through elections, we need to go back and talk about getting credible people through the primaries process. And until we can hack that, again, I don't know how AI and technology can help with that. But until we can hack that, I think that it's very futile to think on election day that, oh my God, we have a great chance, we're going to vote in credible people. Already, most of that battle is already lost. So how would AI, maybe how would tech help political parties be more transparent, more democratic in terms of their membership? That's a possibility, but it's a possibility, it's something that the parties know too well, but are not interested in doing. So again, maybe this is where INEC as the regulator could, if it had any credibility, use technology to sort of force parties to register in a transparent way. But if we can't even register voters in a transparent way, I find it hard to see how we're going to register party members in a transparent way. So I'm sorry, I probably don't, this is not the answer you want, but I'm not, maybe Khadijah or Samson will have some ideas. But as I said, for me, if we're not looking at the parties and the primaries process and making that more legitimate, more inclusive, more democratic, then we're literally wasting our time on election day. And that, for me, is one of the reasons, in addition to how we collate votes, why people are no longer voting. People have lost a lot of trust, and I think that word has been used a few times this morning, in the system. And that's why they're not voting anymore. So we need to be more deliberate, intentional about the, what's the word? The sequencing of our attention. So before we talk about elections and voting credible people, let's go back to primaries and how we can get credible people in through that system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayisha. There is hope. I can feel some level of uncertainty. I don't want to use skepticism or cynicism, but yeah.
Oh,
but
I'm fully cynical, and I own it. I'm very cynical.
Yeah. But I would just follow up on this, and then I will leave Khadijah to handle the other side of this. We know that everything rises or falls, I mean, with leadership. And I'm looking at that point of the possibility of having better people being elected. And you've raised, and we believe that is the solution to this. People who are credible, people who we think can be better. We don't have perfect candidates, but to have a new set of candidates, I mean, just like you said in your opening statements. Now, I want to just follow up, Ayisha. You're a legal, you're a lawyer, and you know also that even in these issues of talking about better data management processes, better digital governance models, like Samson has spoken about, probably deploying AI, cleaning up data. So do you think that if we advocate, and sometimes INEC will tell you they won't even want to use a technology to be able to verify whether this person is this person, that name you're talking about, or that card that you're talking about, whether it's even fake or authentic. Now, do you think that if we advocate for reforms, laws that make it so transparent that we are able to know and see how many people are in this party from, I mean, even at the primary level, how many people do you have in this party? How many people, so we can know that even the electoral process at the primaries, I mean, at the ward level, how many people are registered in APC, in PDP, that we can have these things published. Do you think that if you have more transparency at the grassroots level, at the party level, we make it a law, this kind of things, and we extend that to the real show, the grand finale itself, at the governorship, at the gubernatorial elections, the local government elections, the federal elections, senatorial and executive, and all of that. do you think that if we advocate and do you think laws, I mean, legal reforms can actually make a difference? Because we are not going anywhere. People think there won't be any change until change makers find a way through the primaries and the secondaries and the tertiaries of elections to be able to bring about this change. What do you think? Legal tools, yeah.
Yeah, I think that you're right. We could definitely advocate for and probably see some bills introduced to the National Assembly and actually see that passed into law. And I think we've seen over the last, I would say, when did the WIS Electoral Reform Commission report come out? Maybe around 2011 or so, if I'm right. Okay, no, it was before that actually. My point is, we've been steadily making incremental changes to our electoral law through just what you've talked about, you know, introducing and advocating with civil society and other politicians to make piecemeal changes. So it's quite possible that we could also introduce a law for this to happen. But yeah, it's always, we have lots of laws in Nigeria. It's, you know, the implementation of the laws somehow, but it'll be a good step to have that law and then worry about the implementation after. So I would say yes. I see an opportunity even before the laws come out by people just crowdsourcing this information and putting it online. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about, you know, about AI, or this one of the benefits is just how you can also use AI to democratize information, to use bots to answer people's questions. You know, so is there a website somewhere or some crowdsourcing website where people can sort of like, what's the name of that site where you can get information on anything? The name now eludes me, but you can all change it. I guess there's a danger to that, but yeah, like for example, I noted it when I was running for office that you can't go online and find out, oh, I'm an APC member, I'm a PDP member, I'm an SDP member, and no, this is my ward office, this is my ward chairman. All that information is absolutely not available, and you don't even need a law to put that information up. So we can actually even start with just collecting that data. Whether it's AI, whether it's tech, we always need data. And I think we could be more imaginative again about the type of data that we're collecting. It does cost money, and which is why I mentioned crowdsourcing. So if you crowdsource, then everybody's bringing their own information. Oh, I know the chairman of this ward or that ward, and we just put everything online and people have access to it. But yes, laws will work, and being creative about how we pull this data together and share it is also very important.
Thank you so much. I think I casted you in the right place. Participation. I gave you the right role. Yeah, participative democracy, whether elections and all of that. So, and it's so interesting. What you're talking about is exactly what we've begun to do with our Divided We Stand newsletter, where we are crowdsourcing and spotlighting people at the ward level, councillors. Some of them we find out that we don't even know whether they exist, whether those councillors of those wards, we don't have anything. They don't have any digital footprints at all. So we don't even know whether those names exist, whether they are even in the country, even if they exist, whether they're in the country or not. So it's something we are trying to, it's an effort we're making to have a database of who is the local government chairman, who is the ward representative, so that the people at those levels, if they have a problem with electricity, they know something happened suddenly, there's a flood or something, they know the phone number to call of their own first responder, who is their ward councillor. So it's something we are doing, and I think probably Miss Ayisha will be happy, because she's the participation guru. So thank you very much. I go to Khadijah now. Yeah, because we're trying to round up. We'll be having the questions from the from other, the audience. Now, what will you do differently? What will you suggest to be done differently? You've seen the myriad of challenges that Ayisha, yourself, Samson have enumerated. Talking about the digital side now, the data management side, the use of AI. AI is used on our Excel sheets. It's used on all those, or even the simplest to the most complex. Data mining and data processing apps and tools. We see AI suggesting this, helping to do cleanups and all of that. Now, so what do you think we can do better, beginning from Nigeria to the next elections? While Ayisha is working on how we get, better people who can deliver, what do you think we can do better in terms of digital governance, digital management, electronic transmission, verification of those numbers? What do you think we can do differently, perhaps in the next election, probably beginning from the next local government election? I think there's this state that is having a pending, I think, is that Kano, I think, local government elections. What do you think we can do differently? Solutions now. Khadijah.
Thank you for that question. So it does bring me to the fact that I had a few thoughts on Ayisha and Samson's commentary earlier. So first, when he made his comments about the use of AI, I thought really he was right about the fact that whenever we mention AI or the use of AI, especially in elections, the first thing that comes to mind is disinformation, because that is the way that it has been used in the past. That is what we're seeing. We're not seeing a lot of governments embracing technology towards transparency. And it's not just an election issue. I think it's a character issue. It's a thing of our climate. A perfect simple example is that we're still using ayes and nays to vote in the National Assembly when there are machines that can tell you the exact number of people who said yes and no. That is intentional. The lack of transparency is intentional. We've seen different government institutions fight any sort of technology that brings a level of integrity to a system. We've, seen fights over things like IPPIS, biometric registration, just to come into work. And it's not just, my point is that it's not just an electoral issue. So of course, AI has the capacity to provide that level of transparency, but it is intentionally not being used. And that brings me to something that Ayisha mentioned. And she mentioned, when registration happens, why can't it just be one card? Because truly in Nigeria, we are doing biometric registration all the time. You want to drive, you go and do biometric registration somewhere else. You want to vote, you go and do biometric registration. You want to open an account, you go and do biometric registration. Somehow there's still a national identification number on top of it, and you're not sure, okay, what is the use of this and that? The truth is that we have a data collection problem in the country. And the reason why constantly we're seeing that even after you complete one process, before you know it, there's an attempt at everybody re-registering somewhere else. I'm sure you remember the rush with Pantami, for everybody connects this and this. Someone comes with the biggest idea every time they come into power that would somehow clean the identity management system. It is because we've not been collecting this data correctly, and we're not collecting all of the information. So as it stands, no one biometric collection post in Nigeria right now has all the information or has it correctly. I'm sure we've seen people who have NIN, BVN issues, who have the same name, and it is something about the space between this and this. Maybe there is a dash in your name somewhere that is not supposed to be, or someone added nil because you don't have a middle name. The agencies of government are not, they're not harmonized. within themselves. The data is not even being collected properly
Yeah.
before we even go to how that data needs to be protected. We also have a data protection problem. The Nigerian Data Protection Commission, which is going to be 2 years old in July, is completely overwhelmed. They are completely overwhelmed with all of the data breach issues that exist in the country, from government to private institutions. It is a matter of where does one even begin? And we're seeing that, at least though the Nigerian courts are catching up when it comes to data protection and are making a lot of judgments that are protecting people's data, but it does not feel as though it is cascading down. Where do we, in making things better, where do we start from, really?
Yeah.
Where do we start from?
Let me
We
just
want to collect data properly. We want to adopt data protection practices. We want to be transparent. These are things that we know and the government institutions know as well, but are not doing because it is beneficial for them. Where these issues exist, the electoral discrepancies can help them all ascend illegally into office without question. So it then behoves upon us to do what we can to hold them accountable. So I guess I can give it a pause here.
Yeah, so just a pause because we are almost rounding up now. And I think you are the technical person in who is managing the data and all of that. So there's still going to be the final remarks. But I want to ask Khadijah, you have mentioned that the issue we have has to do with data transparency. No, but some people don't just want this to work. Is it too much of a radical ask for us to say, if you don't have a NIN, you can't vote? Ayisha was talking about that. I have NIN, and that's my permanent identity forever in the US and in the UK. Now, do you think that this thing can become more credible if we just say you're going to be, your NIN, whatever it is has to be your instrument for voting? You don't have it, you can't vote. Do you think it will reduce these problems that you have itemized? Do you think it can solve this issue, or what are your other thoughts? I actually want solutions, and you probably could have this. These interventions you think could actually solve these problems? Yeah, just in a minute, please. Khadijah.
So I think it's the idea is good on paper, but it's a bit more complex than that in Nigeria anyway. Nigeria is a bit more complex than most of these other nations for various reasons. So while it will be my preference, in fact, that we have one means of identification and that is it. That means of identification will take you to the bank, it will take you to drive, it will, you do it one time. That is what is ideal. But then with our elections is very interesting. An example is the issues with your polling units versus where you live. An example is someone might live in Abuja, but prefer to vote in their state. How do we then propose to fix some of those minor issues? Because before you know it, we're going to have people that are voting in different places. But it does not mean that we cannot use one card. Another issue that we have is we start planning late. If we have elections in 2027, very likely you see that we're starting the conversations in 2026, end of 2025. Nations that have gone further than us are planning 5 to 10 years ahead. Let's start having these conversations now. And if we as a nation resolve that we are going to use one means of identification. Let's start ironing out the kinks right now. Let's know, how are we fixing this information? How are we ensuring that the government does not shut down the internet? What are the ways that we are holding, we're holding both sides accountable? It's not 2025 that will pass an electoral act, a new one, all of a sudden we're rushing to buy new machines that will register voters. Let us start now, and that is why this conversation is fantastic. The other thing I would add is that when the plans are being made, when we're resolving for what happens next in the country, it should not just be political parties and the quote-unquote political stakeholders. Everybody should be involved.
Thank you.
Multi-stakeholderism.
Yes. Thank you so much, Khadijah. Yeah, I was coming lastly to Itodo, Samson Itodo. I said he's the has to be for it. But responding to Khadijah, we have been monitoring the NIN registration across states and across the years, and we see that it's like plateauing. There is those significant increase in the number of people being registered. So I'm going to pose that question. I posed that to Khadijah. She said, "Oh, it will be a wonderful idea." Of course, there is the issue of infrastructure. Are we sure that the people in the rural areas, probably some of them will be disenfranchised, probably they don't have NIN and all of that. So there is all of these issues with it. But do you think that even if we because we have started discussing this early, probably not too late into the next election cycle, do you think that if we talk about this NIN, probably it could save the cost of all these, doing another identification, permanent ID, non-permanent ID card, permanent voter register, PVC, TTC, all of these things? Do you think it can save the cost that Samson is worried about? Do you think it can bring a measure of permanence, a measure of more accuracy in the data that we have, being able to audit, because we have a database that we can use to audit whatever is going on in the election booths and what have you. Do you think, even if we say we have a disadvantage of maybe exclusion of people who have not been able to register, do you think if you have something like this, it might even drive up that registration NIN that appears to be plateauing in recent months and recent years? And then you can then add I saw you raised your hand. You can then add your final interventions quickly, 2-3 minutes.
These questions you've asked, they're quite a handful. But so Yiaga Africa has done extensive work on voter registration and data management. And I raised my hand because of the point Khadijah was making. And let me just say 3 things because of time. The first one is there has been, yes, we have a data management problem. There have been efforts in the past to consolidate our data. Under the Buhari administration, there was an interagency committee that was set up comprising NIMC, Population Commission, INEC. And the goal was to harmonize, our national identity database. One of the things that they found was some of those databases have some challenges. And so when you think about the most authentic database that we sort of have compared to the others, it will be the NIMC and the INEC voters register. In fact, I am part of a technical committee comprised of the National Assembly and other actors. And one of the technical committee on electoral reform, one of the conversations is to use, NIMC for voting. And at Yiaga Africa, we've said this consistently, that we no longer need the PVCs to vote because the BVAS already contains your voter registration details. To avoid disenfranchising people, please, people can show up at the polling units with an official form of identification. As long as their name is on the voters register, they should be allowed to vote, because we've seen cases where people are disenfranchised due to logistical challenges on the part of INEC.
Yeah.
And that should not repeat itself in 2027. So that's also the second dimension to this. Now, we no longer need the PVCs. The PVCs have outlived, to be honest, they've outlived their use with respect to voting. They may still be a form of identification, but people can vote without the PVCs. The third point about, the national registry. So there are different forms across the country. For instance, in South Africa, the voters register is derived from the civil registry. So what you mean, the national identity database. So ideally, INEC should be drawing the list of registered voters from our national database. Unfortunately, we've had a situation where, either due to interagency rivalry, the superstructure upon which we've built our national identity database is quite faulty, and that's why we have all these challenges. So looking to the future, we understand, was it not last week, the president chief of staff created a committee for national census also. And they are looking at new ways of ensuring that they also capture biometrics. I hope at the end of this, they will consolidate the data. And you need the political will on the part of those institutions to work together, trusting each other, and avoiding this political economy of voter registration. I think my last point on this is, to sum this up, is over the years, all we have done is to play the politics of data management in Nigeria and not use data for effective planning purposes. Rather, people see the politicization of this entire process. And just really say that the elections are 669 days away. That's 1 year, 9 months, and 26 days. To guarantee the credibility of the next elections, we need a new INEC. And for Nigerians who are on this call, there's a great need to continue to demand a credible, competent electoral commission, because the INEC chairman will be leaving in December. And so we need to amplify the demand, for a next INEC chairman who, will not pander to the whims and caprices of politicians. And Shay, the way you're smiling since you said you framed me as an INEC chairman, FYI, I am not qualified by virtue of my age. I'm not qualified to be appointed an INEC chairman. So don't even go there. Over.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Don't worry. When Ayisha becomes the president, I want to assume that it will be, probably she will nominate you as the INEC chairman, and maybe in acting capacity, even if you are still too young to govern. To govern our elections, and Khadijah will be there also, making sure that all the digital issues are top notch. Yeah. So before we have the closing remarks from our CEO Joshua Olufemi, I will just be, because of our time, we have just about 3 minutes to go. I would be taking a question, just one of the questions that have been submitted. I'm so sorry. This is something that will continue. We usually want to start early so that we can have the optimal impact on the next election cycle. So this is something that will continue, I think, about almost every month. So the question here, I don't know who I should face it. Someone asked here that, so that just summarizes everything we've talked about. What is the likely scenario of several parties deploying AI to cheat during elections? What is the likely scenario? Who should I give that to? Is it the INEC, the shadow INEC chairman? Samson, please respond to that quickly. That people could use data, manipulate data, and even AI to cheat during elections. Yeah, Samson, quickly, a minute.
I think that one of the things that, in terms of scenario, is that politicians will use AI to pollute the information ecosystem in a way that it influences political behavior. So one example could be politicians can use generative AI, to discourage voters from turning up to vote in the stronghold of their opponents. They can use generative AI to say, produce deep fakes that INEC has not deployed materials to those polling units. An election is not taking place in those polling units, but then election is actually taking place. They can also use AI or generative AI, to produce deep fake showing an INEC chairman declaring them as winners, in an election. So there are different ways, and that's information integrity. But the other ways is they can also use that, use AI to manipulate. So there's also the cybersecurity conversation. And one of these, well, I wouldn't say saddest thing, is that in this discourse on electoral technologies, we're now focused more on AI and we're not focused on cybersecurity. And so we've substituted discussions of cybersecurity with AI. And we forget that there's a lot of cybersecurity threats, that AI does pose, but also elements posed to our electoral process. Because think about it, if your voter register is hacked, if your results collation system is hacked, then your election is as done. But we have to stop them. And that's why conversations like this are important. Over.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I take that as your closing remarks. And I also take it that we've had the Khadijah. Just in 30 seconds to close, can we hear, Ayisha, your closing remarks, please?
Well, thank you. It's hard to follow such a vibrant conversation in seconds, but I'll just say that, look, I think the political will, what we've danced around most of this past 90 minutes, is the political will to do things properly. And I think there's a really great book by Nanjala Naibola, where she talks about, she wrote it a couple of years ago, and she calls it Digital Democracy, Analog Politics, talking about the Kenyan elections. And for me, I think that's really something to look at. I would say digital elections and analog politics, and the analog will always influence the digital. So we need to be more discerning about that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These are great submissions. Our research team will be looking into all of these, and they will inform the next line of conversation on this. We believe that if we keep talking about it, we keep saying it, we will be able to move the needle a bit, and progressively, instrumentally, we will get to where we ought to go. I want to appreciate Ms. Ayisha Osori. I want to appreciate Samson Itodo, Mr. Samson Itodo, and Ms. Khadijah also for gracing this webinar. And that's actually this is actually the maiden webinar on elections, looking forward to the 2027 elections. I want to appreciate everyone, all the audience that have joined, the co-participants, and the technical team for a great work they're doing. I've not seen any glitches yet, and I think we have almost escaped all of that. So over to our CEO, the CEO of Dataphyte Global, Joshua Olufemi, to give the closing remarks, and then we call it a day. Joshua?
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you so much for this, everyone, Madam Ayisha, Khadijah, and Samson, and Shay, for such a robust discourse. I think for every three recommendations or points that Samson made, I guess it was throwing us into more thoughts or food for thought to begin to give. And for every provocation or even critical questions that you had from Ayisha, we were clear that there's still a long way to go. Generally, beyond even just a conversation of inclusion, is making simple things work for a country like ours. And if I can reference one of the points that was made, and I think an article that had been written before by Dataphyte around data integrity, I think that's where I would land. And maybe the question I kept asking, even as Samson was talking, is do we need another electoral act review for any of this, even deployment or adoption to happen? Or would this just be a question for INEC to answer? Do they have the powers to do all of this? You had already, Samson already mentioned to us that by December, we probably will be talking or thinking of another person to take over. You also, certainly mentioned, something about the age that makes you qualified to, lead an electoral management body. Those are fundamental questions that I believe we've been able to highlight from this conversation. But I think, like we said, and like Shay mentioned just now, this is just a starting point for us. We think if we don't highlight the issues, many of us are also working blindly, and we come with a lot of agitation, but little or no knowledge about how to contain or even construct our political participation altogether. And that's why we're doing this. And let me just say thank you, thank you. I'm going to leave us with 3 thoughts. Very good one that Samson started with. Cybersecurity. This is not the first time. I think we've had like 2 instances of INEC website, being hacked in the space of 12 years. And that makes it's even easier to do those things now. Our national statistics body also got attacked recently. I hope and I'm praying, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, that CBN will not be the next. But it's important to begin to pay attention to key institutions that hold our data as one to protect and to begin to look for, tools and rules that can help us achieve that. The other is just basic data availability that helps, conversations that help innovations and, civic participation, like Ayisha was mentioning earlier, right? If we don't know who is the ward chairman, how can we track or can we hold them accountable? If we don't even have the polling unit data anywhere, the last elections that we've had, 3, 4, 5 cycles before now, we can't even find the results anywhere on INEC website. Basic data are missing, and I think those are conversations that we'll still bring up as we go on. The other conversation is the question of, data interoperability, right? We're talking about NIMC data, the INEC voters register, talking of every other form of identity that we can use. But it means that the data need to be talking to each other. Because as soon as you say we should start using NIMC, the question is, cyber cafes have seen a new job, which is to start to photocopy and create some of this. How do we ensure that we are not just thinking of using other forms of identity, but we're talking about security, integrity, and interoperability of some of these tools. And where does the law leave us with all of this? Should we start to talk to the National Assembly, or what do we need to do? And I will leave us with the closing thought, something that Ayisha provoked us to, which is, can we have an election that is not driven by good institutions? And what are the things that make good institutions, if not the people who are, representatives, or who are, holding those institutions, keeping them going? I think I'll leave us with that and say, as Nigerians in various institutions where we work, whether civil society, third sector, public sector, corporate sector, how do we all come together to create a democratic, environment that thrives, and then we can have every other process such as election, counting and being, delivering on its outcomes for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Someone has said that if Joshua is distracted, just say data. He would come, he would become alert. And if he's sleeping, if you just say data, he will wake up. I think he breathes data. And recently is, I think, AI. I don't know, between AI and data, which one will bring him up, even if he's fast asleep. Thank you very much, Joshua Olufemi, the data man and the AI man. Once again, we are 8 minutes behind schedule. I want to appreciate your time, everyone. Again, this is the maiden edition of our election series. We're going to be having research outputs, reports, and all of that in the looking ahead into the next major election, not only in Nigeria, but all over Africa. So we always welcome you to join us in these ongoing discussions. I think right on the screen here, you see the codes of our recent publications: Gender in Nigeria 2025, media reports of threats to civic space actors and institutions in Nigeria, Dataphyte Election Series, Volume 1, and then Divided We Stand, which addresses this issue of, grassroots, local government, ward, local government, region, state government, and federal institutions. Thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will be saying goodbye. Oluseyi Olufemi, signing off. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Can I leave now?